Welcome back, everyone, to part 3 of our 2026 AI prediction. This is a 3-part series that we started going over some of the predictions that Peter wrote in his latest blog. Episode 1 and 2 dove into the first, I think, 6 predictions, and today we are going to tackle the last 2. We kind of saved the meatier topics for the end here. So today we're talking about market disruption. Peter, in his predictions, wrote that agentic commerce will influence between 3 and 5 trillion in global sales, and also that AI politics will shape what tourism businesses can actually do. Peter, why are we saving these 2 big ones for last?
I mean, I think that they're pretty meaty topics, as you said, so they might take a little bit more time to talk through.
Awesome. Okay. Well, let's get right into it then, because in the article you wrote that it actually came from a McKinsey report that AI will drive 46% of transactions by 2030. So that's not too long, four more years away. Do you believe that number? Does that sound accurate to you?
To be honest with you, I think it's going to be higher, actually. So, like, as much as like many of these other numbers I think are a little overinflated, I think this one could be underinflated, because I think when 5 years from now is a lot of predictions around AI is getting really smart, really capable. We'll have a lot of experience with agentic. I feel like consumers will become more comfortable with agents taking actions on their behalf. So I think that, to me, this number is a bit of a number based on people's current understanding and level of comfort with AI. And I just think that that comfort level is going to increase when it comes to things like agentic commerce. And, you know, so, like, my caveat to that statement is that, actually in tourism, maybe not higher, but other types of transactions. Like, if I think about, I don't know, like the toilet paper that we get from Amazon every, whatever. Or, you know what I mean? Like really basic, simple transactions. It's like, yeah, my agent can just hopefully keep track of my inventory and just order what I need when I need it and just make the transaction happen. So I think like a lot of that kind of stuff will be very, very like agentically capable and done with. Whereas I think that tourism and travel stuff will still have a human intervention component to it, because I'll want to kind of be involved in the planning of my trip. Now, maybe that's a little different for business travel, say than family travel or leisure travel. I don't know yet, but I think it's, regardless, I think it's going to be a pretty impactful thing for all kinds of commerce.
Yeah. And just to build on that, I think that it's like, maybe Matthew, maybe you mentioned this before, how like people were so up in arms or like so against like using the Apple Pay on their phone or like their phone to pay for things. And then it's like, as soon as you try it once, you're like, oh, that's so much easier than carrying my wallet around. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden it's like all those qualms and like, the nervousness or the anxiety you had about doing it kind of goes out the window, because you're just like, oh, this is just more convenient now. So all it will really take is one positive experience to kind of like open the door for that trend to really, expand. So that's kind of wild to think about. So about 20 years ago, OTAs kind of came on the market, and that really disrupted the travel industry. Do you think this agentic commerce is like OTA 2.0, or is this like a whole different thing?
Yeah, that's kind of a hard question for me to answer at this point, Kendall, because I think it really depends on what the OTAs do. I think it depends on what the destinations do. I think it depends what individual tourism operators do. So I don't think that story's been written yet. I think it's going to be really depend on, what I will say is the OTAs are being as aggressive as they possibly can, and tourism operators and destinations are definitely not being aggressive. And so my fear is that, yes, it'll be OTA 2.0 and worse, and that the DMO website will become nothing but essentially an index or a resource for the AIs. And then, the OTA will take the entire transaction and all the money out of the community. So that's my fear. And so, I have a fairly urgent call to action for DMOs to like start talking about this and figuring this out, because at the same time, actually, I think there's a huge opportunity for disruption the other way, where actually if destinations and operators actually are smart and get organized, they can actually potentially disrupt the OTA market in a very meaningful way, right? And so, to be determined. Unfortunately, I think the OTAs are just a lot more aggressive when it comes to obviously protecting their interest. And I think that DMOs, just by the nature of being member-based and nonprofit, and you know what I mean, like they're very busy doing a lot of things that aren't necessarily, in my opinion, the right things, like reporting. And so, you know what I mean? So, they're distracted with a lot of kind of like busy tasks. And the bigger picture is maybe running away from them a little bit. So, we'll see.
Yeah. Your call to action there for DMOs. I also think it's a bit of a call to action to like consumers as well, because, there's like this whole buy local, I would say that's becoming a really popular thing. I mean, it always has been, but even more so lately, where people want to consume locally. But I really think that goes to travel. I don't think many people think about like booking direct as being like a form of buy local. But even when you're traveling by booking direct, you are supporting that local economy even better, right? So even on the consumer side, I'll just kind of throw that in there. It feels like the
Yeah,
right time to be.
100%, 100%. And you're right. And like, maybe I can direct my agent also because I can make a preference of, hey, I want to buy direct or I want, like, we don't know. Like, so there's a lot of open questions to me as to how this is going to go because maybe I will be able to direct. And, I give my custom instructions to my, Chat GPT or Cloud account and I say only book directly through, the actual operator because I don't want to give money to the OTA. Like maybe I will have that choice, but I don't know. What I will say is every single brand in the world, every single tourism operator, every single DMO needs to actively be building their website and their digital presence for agents today, right now. And don't like hope that, oh, I won't do anything. Hopefully it'll just solve itself. It's not going to. And you're going to be very in bad shape if that's the attitude you have. So there's a lot of urgency to get going.
Yeah. Okay, Matthew, I have a question for you. So you're in your early 20s. I know you love traveling. I also love traveling in my 20s and still do, but my traveling experience was kind of what got me in the tourism industry. I loved it so much. I was like, how do I make a career out of this? And some of my best experiences come from like just walking through streets or showing up at a location and, you know, let's stay here tonight. So do you think that having AI agents book everything and optimize everything kind of takes away from that spontaneity of travel?
I think it honestly depends on the user. I think for people who want that, I don't necessarily think that they'll use agents then if that is what they're looking for. But for people who, do end up using that, I don't think, at least for me personally, like, I'm not spontaneous like that. I want to have a plan and know exactly kind of what I'm doing, or at least have some control in terms of, okay, I know where I'm staying, but maybe throughout the day we can figure out what we're doing. Like that's the level of spontaneity I'm comfortable with. So, using an AI agent would be fine for me. But I think for those that want that spontaneity, they just wouldn't really do that because they're going to go to that place and continue kind of those behaviors. I don't think the agents really affect that directly. On the other side, though, I think that there can still be a level of serendipity in using AI or agents. As you find new things through the AI that you didn't know would be good or interesting, I think that can kind of still fill that feeling of spontaneity.
Good answer. I think it was a while back you shared a travel blog in our Tane chat about somebody who had used AI to kind of fill a few hours that they had free and in Europe, and they ended up stumbling across this like magical mountain community that they would have never found otherwise. So point taken. That is a good point that people will probably use it to fill in those gaps a bit. So
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
I have a question for both of you then. So if AI agents are kind of like becoming the norm and Peter, you're saying that by 2030, you think the number is going to even be higher than 46% that people are using AI to make those transactions. What about the customer relationship? Do you think that operators are losing that with the customer? Maybe we'll start with you, Peter.
Such an interesting question and maybe a multi-billion or multi-trillion dollar question at the end of the day, right? And so I think it really depends again, right? And so, my kind of answer to that is possibly. And again, kind of further to my answer previously, if we need to kind of validate the threat and we need to redefine the battlefield a little bit here, right? And so, if an agent knows my preferences, my budget, my calendar, I'm not going to go to 5 different hotel websites. I'm going to say, go book, me a trip to a vacation, a weekend in Banff, and it'll be done. So the operators definitely lose the top of the funnel, right? They lose the chance to sort of have that early relationship. But if the operators have clean data, their reviews are really, really good, right? The agents sort of trust them enough to book through them, right? So again, this is sort of that battlefield of the OTA versus the direct booking. And they're not visible to the machine, or if you're, then you won't get the human either, right? So like every single tourism operator needs to basically sort of become visible to the machine in order to even be part of the conversation in the equation, right? So that's kind of the risk. And, at the same time, though, there's a need to move away from kind of the transaction to the emotion, right? And so that's the tech side, but nobody feels related to a booking form, right? Like that's just a transaction, right? It's just credit card details. It's not a relationship, right? So AI removes that sort of friction of that sort of experience that nobody really enjoys. But really, when a guest arrives and the operator has amazing amount of time because the AI has actually helped kind of deal with some administrative stuff and that offline relationship, there's a huge opportunity, right? To sort of kind of get that relationship back later down in the funnel. And then from there, it's about loyalty. And then from there, it's about, again, like the internet is just one way to do search or one way to sort of communicate to people, but obviously a newsletter and having some kind of relationship digitally after right? So I think there's other ways, but yeah, I mean, there's sort of, I'm not sure yet, it's sort of at the top of the funnel or at the beginning of probably they will lose that relationship, or if they don't do anything, for sure they will lose that relationship. But at the end of the day, the OTA or the agent or the website isn't the relationship, right? That's just one part of the relationship. So, it's sort of double down on the actual experience and build that relationship and spend a lot of effort and time into that relationship, and then find ways to sort of put that person into a loyalty program and stay connected to them that way. So, it's not all doom and gloom, let's just say.
Yeah, it sounds like there might be more work like on the after side. So like once somebody stayed with you, it's like, okay, now we really have to like amp it up and get that relationship built. And like you said, the loyalty programs and get them on a newsletter list and stuff, because people might not be, for me now, if I'm going somewhere, I'm following that hotel perhaps on Instagram and I'm searching it and I'm, you know what I mean? So, but if I'm just relying on AI to give me the best result, then I might not do that kind of like upfront relationship building where I'm kind of following and becoming part of the company's data at the start. So,
and I'll just sort of walk you through a bit of a scenario here, but imagine, you have this wonderful experience at a hotel or at at an accommodation, and it's amazing, and their AI systems are all tuned up, and every communication is highly personalized to your needs. It gets to know you really well. It starts to anticipate you a little bit. You know what I mean? And then, it builds a really solid profile about you. And then, you get just the right kind of offer at just the right time, because it got to know you a little bit and it started to understand your preferences. So there's lots of opportunities, I think, using agentic AI to actually nurture that relationship and really provide a really personalized one-to-one kind of opportunity from a relationship building perspective. But it takes effort, time, energy, commitment, and really understanding, again, redefining the battlefield. Do we want to be that top of the funnel, or do we build loyalty programs, and do we build amazing experiences, and do we make sure that I'll sort of pick on, we're a Bonvoy Marriott sort of a member, right? And so I'm pretty loyal to Marriott because I show up and it's, Mr. Pilarski, and it's your preferences, and like there's already a lot of chains doing it, a lot of hotels doing it. Now it's becoming accessible to every single tourism brand, whether you're like a small mom and pop shop, a tiny little tourism operator, remote rural wilderness lodge. Now all of a sudden the technology makes that possible for everybody. But if you don't act now, you're going to be out of the game like real quick.
absolutely. Matthew, do you have anything else to add there?
I agree with everything Peter said. I think that, my answer is kind of similar, just that I don't think it's necessarily losing the entire relationship. I think it's just shifting. I think it's, more so to after it's been booked, shifting where and when and how that relationship happens. I think, to our points in the last episodes where we talked about how, AI is not taking over jobs, but taking over tasks. So that in-person time that's now freed up by AI, or should be freed up by AI if DMOs are taking advantage of it, is where more relationship building can happen that maybe there wasn't room for before, regardless of if it was booked from an AI or not, right? There's that time now in person to make things personal, to take advantage of AI to personalize content or offerings for customers. So I think it's really just about, scanning the new playing field and finding the opportunities there.
Amazing. All right, we are going to move on to always a fun topic, AI politics. So, the prediction that AI politics is going to shape regulation and investment. In your predictions, Peter, you said that AI has become a political battleground, and we've seen that. We've talked about this in lots of episodes. Why should a tourism operator care about policy debates, whether it be in Washington or Ottawa or China?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good question. And, I'll talk a little bit about what's going on in the US, because there's a battle between sort of, I guess, what I'd call the Trump administration, just let it fly and no rules. And obviously, people, it's interesting in the United States if we follow it, because it's actually not necessarily party lines, in as much like Democrats and Republicans are actually aligning a lot, and it's more around, should we regulate, should we not regulate? And then now it's the battle is becoming, well, the feds aren't regulating, so every state is starting to talk about regulation. And so from an operator perspective, imagine every state, every province, cities getting involved in regulations. What a disaster for the AI companies for sure, but also for the operators, right? And so, I think that's like the battleground right now is actually about kind of like that a little bit, because if all 50, again, if every sort of small jurisdiction creates regulations, I mean, it's untenable, honestly. And meanwhile, it's like, federally, no regulations are being talked about. I think we really need to kind of understand. To me, it needs to be at the highest level, more at the federal level, so that it makes sense. But history, unfortunately, in politics and government, isn't necessarily that level. Steps up at the right time, and then everybody gets impatient, and then it becomes a gong show of regulation. And what I'll say is, obviously, we have in the United States this battle going on, and then we have midterms coming up in the United States, right? So I've been listening to some podcasts where politicians are like very actively throwing things out on like Twitter and other places and checking reactions. So they're starting to figure out where those sort of like those divisive edge points are in terms of building. Nobody talked about. It's funny. Nobody talked about AI in the last election, U.S. election. I thought it was going to be a huge topic. Nobody talked about it. And then Trump gets elected, and it's like all regulations removed. You know what I mean? It's like, whoa. So like, obviously it was top of mind, but now it's impacting jobs. Now there's questions about education and the impact on education. And now it's becoming real, right? And so I think politically it's going to be a huge battleground.
Matthew, do you kind of trust, I keep saying like you and your peer group, I don't know if you guys have these conversations, but you can just give your own personal opinion here as well. But do you trust like AI companies to self-regulate, or, do you think that the government should be involved, and why?
I'll say, I think for me and most of my generation, we definitely don't trust the companies, at least, to regulate. I think we're all kind of the mindset that a company's main focus, whether it's publicly traded or not, is, in some instances, it's their literal obligation, is to profit and stakeholder value. And the decisions that come from that, obviously we want to believe that they care as much as they say they do, but I think if push comes to shove, there are decisions that have been made and will be made, that won't necessarily align with at least my own personal, moral stance on it. That being said, without getting too political, I don't know that I fully trust governments to regulate as well, and to make the right decisions, and to have regulations over AI, much less, anything else. But I do still think that they need to have a role in it. I think that, an example, not of AI, but, Australia just banned social media for people 16 and under, something like that. We're seeing the result of that, I think, is very similar to what AI has an effect on children and on people. So I think that's an area where absolutely governments should regulate and put their foot down on that.
I saw that as well, and I absolutely love that. So it's funny because I'm also kind of like on the fence of what government should regulate on, but I definitely am in full support and agreement on what the Australian government just did. Fantastic. And then to your point, it feels like kind of everybody has, obviously their own best or interests at heart in making these decisions. And, there was a few months ago there where there was a lot of things in the news with people harming themselves based on their conversations with AI. And we did see, I think it was OpenAI kind of roll out a bit of guardrail around that as well. But it does seem to take like a lot of public outcry before anything gets done, right? So yeah, it's kind of one of those things where it does seem like in this specific case, like it needs to come from the top down.
And I think that public outcry, that's kind of like it's starting to be there, right? Like, I think we're starting to see kind of now people's divided opinions about this technology more than ever, right? And so, yeah, it's going to get pretty messy, I think.
Okay, so bringing this back to tourism, like we always try to do, if, Peter, this is directed at you. Is there a specific example of how AI regulation could kind of impact a DMO or a lodge or an operator this year?
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of talk about the EU AI Act, which is going to be fully applicable by mid-2026. and probably will be, there'll be similar standards around the world. And so I'm going to explain it in context of this. It's called the right of explanation or right to explanation. And so, basically in 2026, will be a mandatory human explanation protocol according to the EU AI Act. And so kind of let me just sort of kind of explain it through a scenario. So imagine July 2026, tourism operator uses an AI agent to handle dynamic pricing and booking requests, and the AI automatically declines a booking request from a guest or quotes them at a really high price, higher price than the average, because it detects high risk patterns or lead times, maybe a brand new user profile, maybe there's some risks on that user profile, like it flags something and it's like, no, this isn't somebody we want, or kind of we need to premium price this because of whatever, right? And the regulation, so under the 2026 regulations, guests has the right to explain an explanation from a human. And that's in the regulations. And so they can click a button, or they'll be able to click a button. It's like, why was I quoted this price, or why was I rejected? Real consequences, right? So, the operator can't just say, well, the algorithm just did it. They have to do daily audits. And they have to sort of have a compliance inbox to clear every morning. They have to do manual review, understand the AI's logic for that specific reason. And if they can't explain it in plain language, then they could be legally liable for discrimination. And so, that's like a real example. That's like next year, like right away. And so, now you don't only just have to manage your guests, but you actually have to manage your AI's paper trail. And if your bot acts like a jerk, you might be going to court. So, it's like really serious. And I know Air Canada actually had a legal case already where the AI basically made up a fake, I think, return policy or something like that, or made something up in terms of like some kind of policy. And they got taken to court and they lost in court because the AI made it up and it didn't exist. So again, AI chatbot's great, but be pretty careful with the AI chatbot you pick, because if it makes things up, you could be in court and it could be messy and ugly, right? So there's a lot of risk actually that I think that, again, this needs to be a conversation, and understanding the regulations and understanding the impacts of the tools we decide to use, having strong human-in-the-loop protocols, having strong paper trails, all of those types of things need to be now things that people are thinking about.
That's wild. So that's the EU, you said, right?
EU AI Act, yeah.
But like you've said before, like it's kind of a good one to watch because typically Canada specifically kind of follows what they do. So this could be
a lot of nations do. A lot of nations do. Like EU is kind of usually on the sort of the leading edge of sort of overregulation, I would just say, maybe sometimes people think. But, we have it on GDPR, we have it on like privacy compliance, all those types of things. And to your point, Canada is basically just adopting what's considered the gold standard, right? So yeah, absolutely.
I would have loved that option here a few weeks ago when I was booking my flight to come see you guys in Calgary. Because when I had logged on one evening, it was like an amazing price on WestJet. And it wouldn't let me book. They were having like a website glitch. And so I couldn't book it. And then the next morning I logged on to try again and the price had like tripled. And so I went on to chat and I was like, hey, I saw this price last night, but like I actually physically couldn't book it on your website. And it's much more today. Like why? And he's just like, oh, dynamic pricing. I'm like, oh, because I was on your site 3 times last night. So therefore it's more. But yeah, it would have been nice to actually get like a good answer there.
Yeah. And I think consumers, probably a lot of them don't know their rights yet, but these cases will start coming out and people learn pretty quick what their rights are, right?
Absolutely. So I know that we like work with some tourism industry associations, and I think, they do a lot of advocacy work. I was going to ask you what those groups can be doing to help influence AI policy, but I actually think that the question may be what can DMOs and like operators, more on that like localized level, like how can they get involved to help influence some of these policies at a federal level?
Yeah, no, and so like this needs to be a major, like I don't think DMOs, I don't think industry associations, I don't think anybody's having enough conversations about these at the real high level, like really strategic level. So everybody's excited about AI. Everybody's bringing in people like me to teach them how to use it better and do workshops and all kinds of things. And that's all great. But, I go to these and it's not even sort of this level of policy per se, but, I've been doing this for 2.5 years now, speaking at conferences, and still I would say maybe maybe 5 to 10% of people even have an AI policy in their organization, right? So first of all, I think leading by building your own AI policies as an association or as a DMO and being a leader in your community is a starting point, right? And communicating those policies and communicating the importance of them. But beyond that, obviously, the advocacy piece is, you're probably doing two things. So you're probably running a bit of a defensive strategy. So kind of lobbying for safe harbor laws regarding AI hallucinations of some kind, right? So right now, if an AI agent booked through a third party tells a tourist the hotel is pet friendly when it's not, kind of who's liable, right? And so they're probably advocating for, should be advocating, fight for source of truth protection, those types of things, right? And then sort of offensively, fighting for open standards to prevent kind of monopolies and things like that, right? So, kind of lost the war to the OTAs because we let them own the customer interface. Now we're about to lose the next war to the LLMs. If ChatGPT and Google becomes the only way people book travel, they'll charge a toll, right? And so associations should be really funding and lobbying for open standards like the Open Travel Alliance 2.0. We need public roads for digital bookings type of thing, right? So kind of really offensively sort of trying to get ahead of basically the monopoly taking over, right? And kind of getting politicians to understand the value of the DMO and the value of local and the value of not just giving all of this away to, to everybody else. Because, when they have a monopoly, they'll charge whatever they want, right? And so we need to prevent that, right? There's a couple of other things like clean data mandate, lobby governments to fund AI readiness grants for small medium-sized businesses because they can't afford to restructure their own data to make it readable by AI agents. So I think there's a big role. I think that some funding can help that and should help that. The agent-to-agent protocol, so publicly back open source protocols that allow booking agents to communicate directly. If we sort of don't build standard plumbing, big tech will build their own plumbing and charge us rent kind of thing, if you want to think about it that way. The human premium, lobby for tax incentives or cultural preservation grants for businesses that maintain human staff and hospitality roles, framing human service as a premium export product, right? So there's a whole bunch of different things I think that can be done, and there's a way more that should be done. So, my number one kind of, piece of advice to all associations and all DMOs is start building committees, start understanding these issues, start building your list of kind of advocacy topics, start building your key messages, right? And I don't even think most people in this industry even understand any of what I just said. So start learning about what this stuff means. You know what I mean? And if you need help, we're here for you. But these conversations needed to start a while ago, and they need to start yesterday. And if not, today is better than yesterday.
Totally. And maybe I'll just say, because we're friends of many of these tourism associations.
Yes.
And specifically, I'm thinking of, off the top of my head, TABC. They are kind of the voice that is speaking at the provincial and federal levels, maybe as a little pitch there. It's become members. If you're an operator or DMO, become a member of these associations, because really they're going to be your voice as well. Yeah. At the higher level. So if you're a member and you can talk to them about what your concerns are, then they could kind of relay those messages.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. I think it's a really good point because at the end of the day, if I think about Taya BC, for example, and Walt, he's a very busy man. He's got a lot of advocacy files he's trying to fight. He's got a big amount of work on his plate. So this is not exactly easy for a guy like him or his board or anybody to really get their heads around. So, that grassroots, the people that are sort of building this stuff from the bottom up and have these concerns should also be sort of voicing their concerns up, right? It's not just, hey, let's wait for somebody else to do it for me, right? Step up, get involved, make it an issue, right? Start to ask questions, right? Force the issue, make it a topic type of thing, right? Because, everybody in this industry is stretched, right? And we know that. And so, this isn't an easy thing. And all of a sudden we have a completely new set of very technical, difficult things to lobby on that 99.9% of people know nothing about. So there's a huge amount of work to do here, right? So I don't want to sugarcoat it and make it sound like this is easy, because it's not.
Absolutely. Matthew, this might be a tough question. I don't know, but you are newer to our organization. You have kind of a fresh lens, and you've kind of sat through with some industry so far in some of our sessions. If off the top of your head, if there was kind of one AI regulation that you think would be, specifically useful for the tourism industry, is there kind of one that comes to you off the top of your head?
Yeah, my first thought kind of went to something similar, at least with Canada, about our broadcast laws and how, we're required to have a certain percentage of Canadian made And there's also very strict guidelines on what Canadian made means. So for something like a radio station, for example, for listeners outside of Canada, our radio stations or our TV stations, they have to show a certain amount or play a certain amount of Canadian made content. And, Justin Bieber, for example, doesn't qualify necessarily if he's, the singer, but then every producer and instrumentalist on there is not Canadian. It has to be a certain percentage within that. So tying it back to tourism and AI, I think that, if there could be a law that requires AI to present or maybe prioritize, or at the very least label, these small or local Canadian businesses rather than these massive, monopolies or larger companies that are not based in Canada, that are not direct, organizations, I think that would help in kind of buyer awareness. It will align with people who are looking for those things, and it will also, promote those industries as well. Whereas, if that's not really there to help them, then, if the broadcast laws weren't here, then we would probably be dominated by US music and US shows and all this stuff. And kind of tying back to that, the Canadian jurisdiction or law that was passed to, invest in AI infrastructure in Canada, like that's how we protect our culture and our history and that kind of stuff. I see it as very, very similar.
Very much
I
so.
love that. Yeah, bringing it back to that whole kind of like local, buy local concept we were talking about earlier. Yeah.
And I'll just say too, this is sort of a broader point, less tourism and even AI, but like we're going to be in a place where we're going to be rewriting the social contract to some extent, right? So like there's going to be a lot of really big conversations happening over the next little while. And the sooner we can start having those conversations, and the sooner industry associations and groups with special need like interests can start to shape that. So again, to me, it's just like start having committees, start having working groups, start having discussions, start understanding, right? Because it's going to be all of a sudden like, whoa, and everybody's going to be caught with their pants down a little bit and trying to figure out how to, come to the party kind of thing, right? So, just get prepared. No streakers.
Love it. I feel like that is a beautiful way to end this little discussion here. No streakers. Great conversation, guys. So that's all 8 of our predictions. We will have them all on the blog and linked in this article. So of course, just to kind of recap, we went over those foundations: AI literacy, jobs, context engineering, and then moved into the agentic AI, multi-tool strategies, GEO, and then of course with this agentic commerce and AI politics. So a lot of big predictions for 2026. It's going to be a really, I think, fun and wild and just an exciting year ahead. I think there's a lot of opportunities ahead of us, a lot of more discussions to be had. And maybe I'll just step back there for a second, Peter. Which one are you like most excited about? Like out of all these predictions and like for 2026, kind of what are you most excited about?
I think I'm most excited about the AI literacy piece, honestly, because I really do think that people are really starting to kind of get that there's a lot to learn here. Matthew and I just did we were all just part of a session today, right? And Matthew and I did another session with another group this morning, and in both cases, it's like, wow, there's a lot to learn here. And I think that awareness coming out is really kind of cool, right? But again, what I really like about the AI literacy piece is that as much as there's a lot to learn, unlike any technology in the history of humanity, like aha moments come so quickly and they're so powerful. You know what I mean? It's like, wow. Like every time we do these sessions, it's like, people literally are like, man, I can't wait to like just get to work and start playing with this stuff and start figuring this stuff out, right? Like it's very exciting, right? So it's like, to me, it really makes me feel excited to see that spark in people. And so I think, if there's a lot of that happening in 2026, I think it's going to be a very fun and positive year.
What about you, Matthew?
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I think, obviously the blog says the number one is the number one, it's the forefront for everything up, that follows. But I think, yeah, the opportunities that are there once there is that understanding and that literacy, it's the limit doesn't exist in terms of what people can do. And I think we're also, at a stage in the world where, with the internet, for example, like people are learning things that you used to have degrees for off of YouTube. And now with AI, it's becoming so much more accessible, so much easier for people to ask the questions in, natural language. They don't have to know what they don't know. And, it's about understanding that is a possibility, that you can, use the tool to learn about the tool and to use what it can do as well.
I am personally so excited to be a traveler this year. I can't wait to go on some trips. and just be on the other side of it as well. All the work stuff that we do is so fun, but I love testing all these tools and kind of seeing them in action whilst traveling.
On that note, Kendall, I really have been wanting to do this for a long time, and maybe 2026 early will be my time. Is I just want to plan like a 4-day trip exclusively with AI. I will do whatever it tells me to do. I will go
Mhm.
wherever it tells me to go, and I want to document the entire experience and just
I
sort of
love
see what
it.
happens.
Yes.
That would be a fun podcast and blog and experience, but I've been wanting to do that for a while, and I think it'll be a super fun experiment to do. So
Okay,
to be determined.
I feel like that's like, I know you're going to a conference in Vegas in April, and I feel like Vegas would be a hilarious place. Could be dangerous, but be a good place to do it. But awesome. Well, great conversation. Of course, we'll link everything in the show notes. And if anyone's listening and they've been wondering how to get started, or they're stuck, or they just know they have more to learn, 2026 is your year. Reach out, and there's so many different ways that we can help and be part of the conversation. So yeah, looking
And
forward to all
similarly,
listening.
if you do enjoy this podcast, please like, share, and subscribe. And that really helps us a lot. So we'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll add on to, for any tourism industries out there as well, if you're looking for ways to kind of share that information, I think our, AI Minute Snippet is a great opportunity. It's a free opportunity for you to, share that with your members and share that information that we curate for you. So, yeah, definitely reach out for more information on that.
Nice.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.